Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, November 14th, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about one particular state and its two upcoming Senate elections. So through January 5th, 2020, you will probably hear me reference the 2020 runoff elections quite often. We are looking at the balance of power literally hanging in one particular state that was decided by less than 1% on the presidential level and decided by just a few percentage points on the Senate level. So the reason why we don't have a call in Georgia yet is because they have a runoff system. I've seen a number of you guys ask, what does that actually mean? Well, this means that in this state and a number of other southern states particularly, but there are other states that follow suit, essentially in a general election, if no candidate reaches 50%, so in this case, we can actually see the results here, David Perdue only reached 49.7% of the vote, while Jon Ossoff received 1.7% less of the vote. They do not work in a plurality system. It goes into a runoff. This was also the case in the special election. Raphael Warnock received 33% of the vote, and while he may have received more of the vote than Kelly Loeffler, they are headed into a runoff. So that's why you see notable Republicans on both sides, notable Republicans and Democrats, so candidates on both sides running in the special election because the top two would have ended off in a runoff. So when you're looking at the Senate election, specifically the first one, David Perdue's seat, this was the race that was supposed to be up this election season. The reason why we have a special election is because an incumbent Republican actually retired. Kelly Loeffler was appointed to fill that seat. So those Senate elections are up. Regardless of who wins the special election, they will be up for re-election in 2022. But in the regular Senate election, those that candidate, whether it's or that Senator David Perdue or not currently a senator, but would be Jon Ossoff, they would be up for re-election in 2026. So this race definitely will be determining who holds this seat for quite some time now. It could be red for 6 years. It could be blue for 6 years. So on the presidential level, you might be asking, why did Joe Biden and Donald Trump not go into a runoff? Well, considering that this is a presidential election, they can't exactly have their own type of ruling system. Joe Biden wins by a plurality, and that's just how it works because one state can't just say, we're going to count our ballots one way, and another state can't do it the other way. I mean, the only exception we really see on the electoral map is Nebraska and Maine when they split up their electoral votes, but Georgia does not implement the runoff system on the presidential level. Not a single state does. So Joe Biden has won the state of Georgia according to every credible, and I put an emphasis on credible, news source. Georgia has flipped. And regardless of the hand recount, not a single recount in United States history has ever overturned a presidential election. Not a single recount in United States history has ever overturned 10,000 votes. So it's more than 10,000 for Biden's lead in this state, but I just wanted to point out that it is extremely, extremely unlikely that this result changes. And even if it does, the result is the same. Joe Biden still wins the presidency. But the Senate elections really determine ultimately who wins the United States Senate. Take a look at our called race map. This is the one that you started off in the video with. 50 Republicans to 48 Democrats. Now that it is sure that Joe Biden has won the presidency, the Republican Party needs more than 50 seats. They started off in this election with 53. The Democrats had 47. So they've already surpassed where they were entering into this election. But the question remains, if the Democrats could win in both Georgia Senate elections, would that give them the majority? The short answer is yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will be able to do anything substantial. Joe Manchin has walked back on the idea of court packing. He said he was he needed to think about it, which wasn't an outright no, which was actually a very big win for Democrats, but now he has said absolutely not. Other Democrats may be less inclined to follow suit. I don't really envision D.C. and Puerto Rico becoming states now that the Democratic Party probably won't be winning the Senate unless these results end up favorable. But the point of this video is that we could actually see maybe not a Democratic majority, but a narrow Republican majority, which actually makes it a little bit easier for Democrats to win the majority back in 2022. What I mean by that is the Democratic Party could win the Senate special election, but lose the general election. What does that do? That puts the Republicans in the majority, but only narrowly. And the Democrats being at 49 seats wouldn't exactly be the worst position entering into the 2022 midterm elections. The Democrats are looking to those elections as a possibility of winning the Senate. They remember back in 2018 when the Republican Party lost the House of Representatives, lost tens of seats, but ended up gaining seats in the United States Senate. Despite it being a Democratic wave year where the Democrats won the popular vote by nearly 9 points nationally, the Republicans still gained seats. And that's because they won in states that Donald Trump won in 2016. Well, in 2022, there are 2 seats in particular that the Democratic Party is eyeing up, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. If just one of them flips, given that this map holds true, the Democratic Party could win the United States Senate back. So there are possibilities, but given the lackluster performance from Democrats this election, I find it a lot more difficult for them to win, especially in a year that should favor the Republican Party historically. So why do I think David Perdue's seat would go to the Republicans and then Kelly Loeffler's seat would go to the Democrats? Well, first things first, you have to realize that David Perdue is not nearly as disliked as Kelly Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler was an appointed Republican senator. She has never won an election to the United States Senate. So she gives off Martha McSally vibes, if I'm making that statement correctly. I mean, she was appointed, and while she didn't lose the election prior to it, she has so many other things that could be used against her. I mean, she has literally been accused of insider trading. And while David Perdue has a very shaky history with that as well, I think Kelly Loeffler is someone that could actually get a lot more media attention than she has during the regular campaign season. You see, the CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of them really focused on the presidential election. They focused on some of the more competitive Senate races. Everyone knew that this Senate special election was going into a runoff. But Kelly Loeffler has seen firm opposition not only from Democrats, which is sort of a given, but from Republicans. Even Fox News commentators that are in full-fledged support of President Trump, such as Judge Jeanine Pirro, really ripped into Kelly Loeffler as a person. And the idea of her insider trading that really, I would say, disgusted a lot of the voters. There's a reason why she still only received 26% of the vote as an incumbent Republican. Doug Collins was the clear favorite. And while you may be saying, they rejected Donald Trump because they didn't like him as a candidate, why would they do the same to Kelly Loeffler if she's a traditional conservative? Well, number one, she's not a traditional conservative. She's much more right-wing than David Perdue. Number two, she seems very disingenuous. I mean, she comes across as this multi-million-dollar, before she became a politician, because we all know politicians make money off being politicians, but she had millions of dollars that she supposedly, on her own intuition, sold stocks, bought Amazon stock, whatever it was, invested in companies following her COVID-19 briefing as a non-elected senator. Think about how easily that plays. And it's not just that, David Perdue, while he may not necessarily win in a blowout, he's much more liked than Kelly Loeffler. He was actually elected by the people of Georgia more than once. And when you're thinking about Kelly Loeffler as a candidate, there are just so many opportunities for the Democrats to really dig deep into her. Not only is she a full-on, appointed election official that doesn't exactly resonate with a lot of these voters, she is a full-fledged Trump supporter. And not to say that a Republican shouldn't be, if they were in Alabama, or if they're in South Carolina, or really even North Carolina. But her entire personality is that she is a Donald Trump backer. That is the entirety of the Kelly Loeffler campaign, that she supported President Trump from day one. Well, guess what? Donald Trump didn't win Georgia this time, and she is still refusing to accept the election results. And now David Perdue very well may be doing it, but there are also reports that Donald Trump said he wasn't going to lead them to victory had they not come out in opposition to President-elect Biden. But I really think that this actually hurts Kelly Loeffler even more, because David Perdue, while still, full-fledged supporter of President Trump's, but nowhere near as much as Kelly Loeffler. Her entire campaign was that she was the more conservative candidate. She was the more conservative senator to head off into a runoff election, more so than Doug Collins. She attacked Doug Collins for donating to Mitt Romney. Romney won Georgia. And while Donald Trump did in 2016, it was not nearly as large as it was in 2012. And then his second election, he lost Georgia. She cannot cling on to Donald Trump any longer because he has lost this state. If I was David Perdue, to play it safe, I would run in this election with very little mention of President Trump, because he is only going to bring down these conservative nominees. David Perdue outran Donald Trump. David Perdue received 49.7% of the vote. Donald Trump received 49.2% of the vote. Had Donald Trump done as well as David Perdue, Donald Trump would have won the state of Georgia. He would have won the state's 16 electoral votes. But because he lost what seems to be a slim portion, but actually made a very substantial difference, lost the support from Republicans in the Atlanta suburbs, white women specifically. An increased turnout amongst the African-American community really solidified Trump's loss in the state of Georgia. And I also want to point my attention to the special election. I mean, the point of this video is to highlight that David Perdue can win, but Kelly Loeffler is in a little bit more trouble. Because Republicans voted for Doug Collins because they saw Kelly Loeffler as extreme. Combining all of the Republican votes, the Republicans only received 49.4% of the vote in the special election. While they outperformed President Trump, they still underperformed Joe Biden. The same was not the case in the regular Senate election. So it is actually extremely possible that we see a Jon Ossoff loss and a Raphael Warnock victory. It's not out of the question that we see both lose or both of them win, but Kelly Loeffler is considerably hated more than David Perdue. David Perdue offers name recognition. David Perdue offers more of the same. And while Jon Ossoff really ripped into him for his history handling COVID-19, Kelly Loeffler has never gone through that test of the vote from the Georgian people. She has never gone through that, scrutinous campaign until now. And she hasn't won a race that is substantial enough to elect her to the United States Senate, and that's what's really going to hurt her. Reverend Raphael Warnock definitely hasn't either. But Senator Loeffler, she was literally handpicked for that position. She exudes privilege. People see her and think insider trading, and that's what's really going to hurt her. When I originally thought that this race could end up being two Republicans in the Senate special election, I was thinking, it's very possible that with Lieberman in the race and Warnock in the race, they could both go under Doug Collins or under Loeffler. But, the Democratic Party started coalescing around Raphael Warnock and ended up landing him in the first place spot. But Kelly Loeffler has a lot of work to do as well. While Raphael Warnock only received 33% of the vote, and there was a point in time where we might have written him off. He brought himself from being a little-known candidate to the front runner in the special election. Kelly Loeffler, while receiving a lot of the vote and can expect to receive 90 to 99% of that Republican vote, as Georgia has shown us, every vote matters. Every single vote matters. The elections get extremely close. And while David Perdue only needs a 0.3% nudge, she's going to need, if she wins, assuming she wins, 100% of the Republican vote in Georgia. 100% of the Republican vote in Georgia in this special election, this runoff on January 5th, 2020, she would still need to do a little bit better. She would need to do better than David Perdue. She would need to make up the margin by 0.6 rather than 0.3. And 0.3 was the margin between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And it is very possible that we see a David Perdue victory and a Kelly Loeffler defeat. And while that may not necessarily be the most favorable to Democrats, the Republicans would see a lot more weight on Lisa Murkowski, a lot more weight on Susan Collins. And they no longer have the vice president to break their tie. There will not be a Vice President Mike Pence for 4 more years. And for the sake of the GOP, they are really hoping they don't lose that seat with David Perdue. And I think the most likely scenario at this point is that 2 Republicans win, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. But my very close reality next to it would be 1 Democratic seat in the special election and 1 Republican seat in David Perdue's seat. So overall, the Democrats are definitely going to be looking ahead to 2022 as a possibility of winning the Senate, but they have a possibility here and now, immediately after Biden's victory, before Biden is inaugurated, January 5th, 2021. That is the date that could make or break the Democratic Party's 2 years of passing legislation, of getting things done with a trifecta in the government. And while the Democrats were on track to do so before the election, as we've seen, the Republican Party has shown that they aren't exactly polled too well. They aren't exactly gauged too well in terms of turnout. So we will see what happens in Georgia. I find it very fascinating that the Democrats won on the presidential level, but almost lost on the Senate level and may be on track to lose in both. Now, in terms of who's leading, it actually splits it coincidentally the same way that I would split it. But Georgia headed into a runoff. We could see a scenario where the Democrats win 1 seat, but lose the other. But regardless of who wins the special election, they will be up in 2022. So all eyes on that seat, again, in just 2 years. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my other videos in the 2022 Senate election cycle. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.